Hello, everyone. This is the last part of the series for Ryan's Success series for how to build a strong mindset for success. We're going to look at a case study here, and I'm going to be applying a lot of the different strategies that we talked about in this playlist. So thanks for joining me at the very end here. And let's get straight to it. So Marcus is a 24-year-old marketing coordinator, right? He's at a mid-sized company doing a lot of social media marketing. He's pretty good at his job, but he really feels stuck in a cycle of working on other people's strategies rather than creating his own, right? So he has an idea for a digital marketing agency, but is paralyzed by the uncertainty and fear of failure. He constantly second guesses himself and sees successful entrepreneurs as having some special talent he lacks. So yeah, that's a very common thing, I think, in today's world, to be, in your mid to late 20s, working at a place that you thought was going to find you a lot of fulfillment, and then coming to realize that this is not really what you want, and that, you're very competent at what you do, you're very skilled, you're very capable, you have time and energy, right? But you're not sure if you should just stick with the job or do something else. Now, of course, you can always fail in trying to do something else, and sticking with your job is the most stable option. But I want to talk about some different frameworks and mindset challenges that Marcus is currently going through. Right? So I think one of the big things he has is a very strong fixed mindset of thinking that there is a certain type of person to become an entrepreneur and that he cannot become that kind of person because he's just simply not that type. The reality is that by adopting a growth mindset, he can understand that there's a lot of things he doesn't understand yet, but that he can learn and grow and eventually become the kind of person who will be a successful entrepreneur in that case. Also, he does a lot of reasoning by analogy just inherently instead of using first principles, right? He's focusing on that circular reasoning we talked about that was so bad. Agencies are hard to start because everybody says they're hard to start. No, let's understand why they're actually hard to start and how we can evaluate that and address that and grow yourself so that way you can be more successful at starting your own agency. Also, we really need to look at the second order consequences, not just the first order. Obviously, if you quit, he's going to lose his salary, lose his pay, lose his stability. But, it's up to you, right? Some people want the stability, which is fine. But also, if you are in your mid-20s, you do have a one last chance of trying to do something else before, going out into the world and, starting a family and having a lot of different responsibilities there. So you are at the point where if you want to take a risk, this is kind of your last chance to take the risk. And if you are able to grow yourself in personal ways that allow you to, create a successful business, then that could be a second order consequence that'd be beneficial down the line. It's maybe in a couple of years of you working really hard on yourself, really trying to improve, you can actually grow into something that's, good and be good for you. Also, I think a lot of times we want to focus on, okay, what's going to go right? What can I do to go right for this agency? But a lot of times really what ends up happening is successful businesses and companies and just successful people in general avoid a lot of what could go wrong. So in his case, I think he's really focusing on I'm not the right type. I need to make sure everything goes right. It's okay, no. Start focusing on what you need to learn. Focus on your current level and how far you need to go to get to the next level of becoming a competent business owner to run this agency on your own. And then, kind of focus on, okay, what do I need to avoid? What do I need to make sure doesn't go wrong so I can actually do this? And start learning all about that. Because I think if you avoid a lot of the wrong things, then you can try to get what's right a lot easier. Because when you first start out with anything, it's very likely you're going to fail. And if you can try to reduce the chance that you can fail, that's going to be the best way to guarantee your success. That's also the inversion of thinking we talked about earlier. And yeah, he also sees his career as a very isolated kind of event, right? Rather than an interconnected system. So for his career, he's okay, it's a very linear path, blah, blah, blah. I need to work and then get promoted. But it's having your own agency could lead to being a very big source of experience. If he eventually grows it to, let's say, a decent size, he could say he has managing experience, which could then lead him towards, maybe eventually joining the workforce later, even if this doesn't work out. So there's a lot of beneficial consequences that come from having this agency, even if it doesn't become super successful like he may imagine it. And I think that sometimes we want to avoid a lot of uncertainty and stress, and it's definitely for good reason. But other times, we do need to grow. We do really need to challenge ourselves. We do need to take a risk sometimes because the risk can fail, but it can also lead to a lot of personal growth. Even if it doesn't lead to monetary growth, you will learn so much and become such a more developed person through undergoing this very difficult and kind of seemingly dangerous journey. Yeah. So I really think that, like, in his case, the most important thing for him to do is have a real heart-to-heart talk with himself and just think about what's important to him. And also, using that kind of regret minimization framework that we talked about. When he looks back and he's 80 and he looks back, would he rather have another 20 years of working at this marketing agency, or would he rather have maybe 10 years of trying his own thing and then maybe 10 years of either, it working or him going back to this marketing agency? Obviously, right, success is not guaranteed in any realm, but the reality is that you have to evaluate and make your own decision rather than just allowing people who are around you to make your decisions for him. I think that's one of the problems he has, is he's really being influenced by a lot of his coworkers and family who may have the same exact ways of thinking. And it's fine to stay at your job, but it's just the reality is you need to also think about what could happen as well, and that if you want that risk and you want that potential reward. So that's going to be it for this case. Make sure you guys subscribe for more, comment down below any questions, and stay tuned for the next series.